want to talk about some of the main mistakes that I think people make when they negotiate, both negotiating for themselves, professionally, or on the world stage. First of all, we use the wrong tactics. We use threats, for example, to try and get the other party to move in our direction. But that can be very, very dangerous because you have no control over how the other party might react. In fact, there's very good research done on the neurological impact of threats on the human brain. Threats tend to drive people away from us. They don't pull us towards them or them towards us. So using threats in negotiation is probably not a good idea. Secondly, we use power instead of persuasion. Now, the tendency, if we have power, is to use that power, of course, especially if it's coercive power, especially if I'm the boss, I'm the parent, I'm the one with a bigger nuclear arsenal. In that situation, my tendency might be to use the power to get my way. Now, the difficulty is if you use power, you have no control over how the other side might react to your exercise of power. If you leave them feeling like a victim, the risk is that that victim will become the aggressor. As Abraham Lincoln said, if you want to reveal somebody's character, just give them power. Another key mistake, I think, is that we neglect the so-called soft stuff in negotiation. Negotiation actually is a very, very complex process involving a multitude of skills. You have to have planning skills, facilitation skills, the ability to run the process aspects of negotiation. You have to have so-called soft skills, the ability to listen actively, to empathize, to put yourself in their shoes. A little bit of emotional intelligence can help. But you also need analytical skills. You need decision-making skills. You need creativity skills. So it's a complex set of skills that we require. It's not just about soft skills, but these soft skills can either make or break the negotiation. So instead of threatening people, instead of saying things that drive them away from you, effective negotiation involves creating the right climate for the negotiation. A climate conducive to problem solving, good decision making, and looking for solutions that could add value for all parties to the negotiation. A third problem is, of course, lack of preparation and planning. And the Nissan case illustrates that very, very clearly. The CEOs or the chairmen of the two companies have negotiated a potential deal. They thought this could be an ideal marriage. So far, this has come to naught after several attempts. Why? Because there were other players, the French government, for example, and the Japanese through Nissan, who were not consulted from the start and therefore felt excluded and came with their own demands that actually created a situation where the deal has not gone through up to now. So planning and preparation is also critical. And then there's mindsets, the way we see things. For example, we tend to see things in either-or terms. Either we build a wall or we don't. Either we stay in the EU or we leave the EU. There's nothing in between. And this mindset of either-or, I win, you lose. For me to win, you must lose, is a big, big issue in negotiation. And in fact, that is why most negotiations, according to research, fail, or at least don't deliver as much value as they could have. Because we have to start thinking in and terms. Can't we, for example, stay within the EU but ensure that it is reformed? Can't we ensure that the migrancy issues on the border between the US and Mexico are resolved in a way that is humane without having to spend billions of dollars on building a wall? Can't we, for example, have a merger between two companies that involves looking after the interests of all stakeholders instead of having a situation of it's either the one or the other whose position will prevail? Perhaps I can end off with this one quote from Teddy Roosevelt, who said, "The art of good negotiation is to be firm on the fundamentals, steadfast on the things you really care about, but flexibility in the details."